Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 5 of TBRCon2023. I'm Adrian M. Gibson, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by author Veronica Roth. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. So Veronica is going to be doing a reading today from her new book, Arch-Conspirator, which is out on February 21st in all its beautiful hardcover glory.
Yes,
And
it is a novella. I just always want to preface that for people. I'm like, it's tiny. Anyway, yes,
yeah,
but
but it is beautiful
packed
too.
with punch. It packs a punch.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm from Chicago, and I write, or I started off my career writing YA. I wrote Divergent, probably my best known book. I mean, probably always will be. Um, and, but recently I've been writing for an older audience. I wrote Chosen Ones, which is a contemporary fantasy, and Poster Girl, which is a dystopian mystery. And then now I have Arch-Conspirator, which is a
Right
sci-fi
on.
retelling of Antigone.
Yeah. So I'll show off those covers. Obviously, Divergent, people are probably familiar with. Also,
Yeah,
the movies, Poster Girl, which is a fantastic book, and I love that cover. And then Arch Conspirator, which is the new one that Veronica will be reading from today. So for anyone who hasn't heard of Arch Conspirator, you just mentioned that it is a science fiction retelling of Antigone. But do you want to elaborate on that a little bit and tell people a bit more about the novella?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know how well people remember Antigone, so I think it's probably good to summarize. So Antigone is a Greek tragedy written by Sophocles in 550 BC, I think. Um, and it's about a young woman whose brother dies in kind of an act of rebellion against her uncle, who's the king, Creon. And he forbids her to bury this body properly, her brother's body properly. And anyone who does it will be put to death. But Antigone does it anyway, and it doesn't end well. So that is what makes it a tragedy. So Arch-Conspirator is set in a far future where everything is kind of destroyed. And the society, in order to survive, has resorted to gene editing, which has resulted in some like really controlling reproductive and gender related practices. So it's like follows the plot of Antigone, but it has all of the trappings of this futuristic society at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Why was Antigone an ancient work that spoke to you that you felt you wanted to do a retelling in this sort of light?
Well, I think the way that we think of retellings a lot of the time is like as a correction, like, oh, this is a
Right.
feminist retelling, or yeah, that's usually what we hear.
Yeah.
And like that's great, I love them, but I didn't think of it that way because Antigone as a character has this strength and endurance. She's very like complicated and nuanced, even in the original. Like I say, if you're going to read one of the two, you should probably just read the original. It doesn't take that long. But she kind of stuck in my mind as this person, this fully formed person. And so I just couldn't, I don't know. She's been in my mind for a long time. I never planned on doing a retelling. That's not something that I'm like all that interested in as a writer, even if I like it as a reader. So it was because of her. Like the allure was too strong. I couldn't deny it.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the other day we did a panel on the intersection of nature and technology. You joked at the beginning in your introduction about like entering into the adult fiction space.
Adult fiction.
Adult fiction.
Yeah.
For you, how has that transition been in terms of starting your career with the Divergent books and then going into adult fiction as you yourself have entered further into adulthood?
I mean, it's been interesting. My first adult work, Chosen Ones, came out the first week of lockdown. So it was kind of like, oh, okay,
Oh, shit.
what a way to enter a new genre or a new category. But
Yeah.
I think it's a little strange to be like growing up so rapidly when as your career is growing up, you're kind of settling into the thing that you're going to do. So I feel in some ways I started off with a bit of a fluke, like not really. I mean, it like Divergent, still dystopian, still kind of actiony, so it's not that different. But I feel now like I'm doing what I was meant to do. I guess that's so cheesy. I can't think of another way to put it. It's too early for this.
That's what came into my head too. It's like it was always meant to be.
Yes, yeah. But it's been good. I mean, creatively, it's been awesome. I just had a bit of a bad luck start.
Not a bad luck start. Come on now.
No. I mean, it was great. Just who was thinking about book release in the first week of lockdown? I was like, I don't care that this book is out. I don't expect you to care.
Well, it's all good.
Try not to die,
Yeah, we're a couple years in, and you got 2 new books out in the last few months, so it's gonna pick up.
I'm not worried about it. I'm sorry. I'm a bit of an ER person. You saw this on the panel. I was like, humanity is bad. Everything is doomed.
I'm just bugging you, though. I'm just bugging you. It's okay. All right. Well, from Arch-Conspirator, you're going to be doing a reading. Which section have you chosen, and why was that the particular section you chose to showcase the book?
So I'm reading from the second chapter. The first chapter is like 2 pages, so it's really from the very beginning. And I'm reading from a perspective that only appears once. It's Polynikes, who is, that's how I say it anyway. I'm sure that's not how you say it. But that's Antigone's brother. So we are meeting him before he, sorry, spoiler alert, dies.
We talked about Antigone before and how her brother dies. So no spoilers.
Yes, her brother dies. This should not come as a shock to you. But I think I chose it because it's like, this is the pivotal relationship of the book. Like, even if, I have to establish it early, and you have to like him and understand their connection. So it was a really important chapter, and it's a different voice from the rest of the book because it's Polynikes. So I just thought it'd be fun to read. Yeah. Perfect. I have to turn on a light, so I'm going to glow like the sun in a second.
All right, go for it.
Oh, okay. It's not so bad.
No, it's not bad. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sometimes. Veronica, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Been coming here to the Cafe Athena for several years now, ever since I had spend to burn and she started working here. It was her dad's shop. Had to be, or she wouldn't have been working. But mostly he wasn't here to catch me staring. Figured every woman, from the first one who ever gave me that funny feeling to the one I ultimately got assigned to, would be doing the same equation. Add my famous parents, tragic backstory, generational wealth, and winsome smile, and subtract the unsettling reality of my busted genetic code. And what do you get? Someone worth messing around with? If the waitress at the Athena even bothered with the calculus, she came up decidedly not interested. But the coffee tasted less burnt here than in most other places, so I kept coming anyhow. This isn't coffee, Parth said to me after his first sip. It's liquid shit. True, it wasn't coffee. There were just a handful of coffee plants in the greenhouses, so only a lucky few had ever had the real stuff. This was just an approximation of coffee, with a conjecture of sugar stirred into it. I was sitting at the least rickety of the tables out front, street side, my toe wedged under one of the table legs to steady it. The seat across from me was empty, but Parth was standing, drinking from a tiny mug that made his hand look comically large. Somebody pedaled past with a bucket of paper flowers hanging off the back of her bicycle. One of them toppled onto the stones. Nabbed right away by a beggar kid with a cup for coin. He stuck it behind his ear. You could sit, I said to Parth. Tig probably won't be on time. These chairs make me feel like I'm playing tea time with my niece, he said. Big guy, Parth was. Had the look of a guy who would turn out to be a softie, only he wasn't. Too tricky for that. Plus, I'm done. You let her come all the way here by herself? Some brother. Tig can handle herself. Parth set his mini mug down on the table and eyed me. You're not going to tell her nothing, right? Of course not. But you know her. She might figure it out anyway. Just so long as she doesn't interfere. Interfere with what? A slim, reedy voice asked from behind him. And there she was, my sister, sidling up just as the clock struck 1400 hours. Antigone, Parth said to her with a head bob that was supposed to be like a bow. Parthenopeus, she replied. Will you be joining us? No, gotta run, he said. See you later, Paul. He dodged the beggar kid and his cup, crossed the street, and disappeared into a crooked alley. A gust of wind came up behind him, blowing dust into the air. Antigone pulled the scarf she wore over her hair, across her nose and mouth until it settled. I just held my breath. The waitress came by, that little bounce in her walk, and brought 2 cups of coffee, black, and a pile of sweetener cubes stacked neat like a temple. She didn't look either of us in the eye. Didn't ask if we'd like anything else. I thought you liked the service here, Antigone said. I like the look of it. She snorted. You don't care who treats you like a pariah as long as she's got nice legs. Can't fault people for learning what they're taught. Can too. I do it all the time, she said. So what was Parth on about? I should have known she wouldn't let that go. Something's brewing, I said. You know that. Something's been brewing, she said. You could just tell me what's going on. No need, I said. No help necessary, and it would just put you in a bad spot. She frowned at me. Back when we were kids, we went in and out of looking like our parents. Dad said kids were like that, mushy, sculptures still drying in the sun. Now, though, Tig was settled, hardened, and she looked just like Mom. Bend at the bridge of her nose, weak chin, big round eyes. I'm already in a bad spot, she said, sharp as noon sun. I live in the house of my patricide, and I'm betrothed to his son. Yeah, but there's a difference between a bad spot I put you in and a bad spot I didn't, I said. Plus, the others would kill me. No potential mothers allowed at this level of the operation. You know that. Yes. Sour as. And this is nothing like our mom, who could rip you to shreds with a gentle word if she chose. No subtle streak in Antigone. She's more like Dad in that way. Can't risk me. I'm just a viable womb on stilts. That is the general attitude. Fuck, Paul, she said, leaning over the table, her scarf almost falling into her coffee. I'm so tired of that. We both looked across the little shop with its wares spilling out into the street. Stacks of old cookware, tangles of wires, piles of light bulbs still in their boxes, a rack of sunglasses with mostly intact lenses. It's not me, though. I reached across the table and covered her hand where it clasped the mug. You know that, right? I know everything would be better if you were involved. It's just that we're trying to unite 7 districts, and some of them are more traditional than others. We're only as strong as our weakest links. Her hand trembled a little. I know it's not you, she said. Sometimes I just stare into the future and don't like anything I see. I knew her future as well as she knew mine. We would go where Creon said and do what Creon decreed. We lived by Creon's mercy and we died by Creon's might. Marrying Haman won't be so bad, I said. What do you know? She said. You'll never fear your wife, but every wife fears her husband, even if she doesn't say so. She stuck her thumbnail between her teeth and bit down. A moment later, she added, I don't give a shit about Haman anyway. That's not what I mean. Well, if everything goes right tonight, she laughed at me. I said, you don't have faith in me? It's not you I don't have faith in, she said. It's things going right. Well, I need you to find some. I reached into the bag hanging off the back of the chair and took something out. It was a metal instrument about the size of my hand, pointed at one end, thick at the other, almost like a syringe. An extractor. I put it on the table between us. She recoiled from it like it was a snake. Just in case, I said. Get that thing away from me. You're not dying. Just in case. She leaned over the table, her wide eyes fixed on mine. Do you have any idea what it would do to me if I lost you? She said in a harsh whisper. Yeah, I kind of do, I said. Same as what it would do to me if I lost you. And lately, that seems more and more likely. What's that supposed to mean? The thing about her was, nobody could hide from her, but she thought she could hide from everybody. Like she was some great actress. Like I wouldn't notice my own sister going limp by fractions, all the fight gone out of her. Sometimes you stare into the future, I said, and you don't like anything you see. Don't you dare tell me you're doing this for me. Not just you. God, how long do you think we can go on this way? Any of us. A city of 7 districts. Kids chanted about it in the north. 7 houses crumbling on a Theban street. One's got no fire. One's got no heat. One's got no water. One's got no meat. I saw them once jumping rope to it. They got scattered a few minutes later by the police. Antigone touched the extractor with just her fingertips. What if I don't believe in this shit? She said, nodding to the instrument. What if I don't think a person can be reborn? You don't? I don't know. Well, doesn't really matter either way, does it? I said. I believe in it. And if I die, I want you to promise to store my ichor in the archive. I want you to make sure I can be remade. Consider this my will and testament. Okay? Okay, she whispered. Promise? My word is my word, she said, scowling at me. But yes, I promise. If you promise not to plan on dying. I smiled. Promise. She closed her eyes as another wave of wind swept across us, dusting our coffees. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she wiped them away with her scarf. By the time the air settled again, she looked unaffected. She sipped her coffee, dust and all. This coffee is shit, she said. Everybody is a critic, I replied, and chugged the rest of mine. Thank you.
And that is chapter 2 of Arch-Conspirator. I've had the pleasure of reading the book, so I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I love his. I like that you started with his POV in that chapter, just to kind of set things up and really root things in terms of the relationships between these different siblings, but especially between her and her brother, because you have multiple different siblings and all of them have different kind of allegiances and things like that. So
Yeah.
how was it for you in terms of nailing that family dynamic?
I think it came pretty naturally. So there's 4 of them: Ismene, Eteocles, Antigone, and Polynikes. So they're, I mean, I don't know if that's canon. I mean, I know that those 4 are in canon, but I think there might be more. And my copy editor was like, there's 7 of them. And I was like, I don't care. Anyway, yeah, it came naturally, I think, because they just split in half. But then, there's always a sibling who like tries to cross the barrier, and that's Ismene, the sister, who we have yet to meet. But the thing about Antigone and Polynikes is that in my version, they are twins, which in this world, because of the way they like rigorously control reproduction and do gene editing almost as a religious practice, they're like the ultimate blasphemy. They're twins, and they're also like genetically natural or whatever. They haven't been edited. Gattaca style. So they're just like extra creepy to everybody around them, which is why the waitress reacts to them in that way. But anyway, so I wanted them to be twin-like. Twins have like spooky connections. So so anyway, that part came naturally. Not everything came naturally in this, but yeah.
Well, Kentucky SFF is asking, this is a 2-parter. What restriction does YA put on your writing in terms of themes, language, things like that? And how is Arch-Conspirator notably geared for adult readers?
I don't think YA, like when I entered into YA, it was like the Wild West. It was like, whatever. So I don't think of it as like a really restricted environment that I was writing in before. You do tend to, like, you think about your audience and what they can tolerate and also like what they're interested in. So, the reason I was writing YA is because what I was writing just felt like naturally for them at that time. And then suddenly it wasn't, as probably you can tell by the end of my series, which made them all very sad. But woo, okay, that's another story. But yeah, so I didn't, like, what I'm saying is I didn't change anything. Like, I started writing books that were set in the real world a little bit. So like Chosen Ones is set in, in actual Chicago, not in the dystopian future. And then Poster Girl is also like in a real place, in a less restricted environment. So they did start swearing because they had swears, but I think that was just like a byproduct. But I don't feel the need to speed things up quite as much because that you just have more space to do that in adults. And I also don't feel any pressure to end things in a like hopeful way, which, clearly
is more natural to you.
Yeah, I did not care about that pressure at any point, but I do think it comes from like occasionally you'll run into an editor or, people in the industry in YA who are like, you need to end on a hopeful note. And it's like, no, I don't. So I don't get that pressure anymore. I think mostly like the editorial relationship is what's different now. So there's less concern about the audience, I would say.
Okay. So in terms of like adult fiction, the editorial process is more like, I guess, obviously less restrictive, but also more, I would imagine more open and like welcoming to whatever you bring to the table kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, that probably depends, but also there's just fewer like logistical things to consider in the industry. We're getting like really deep into industry talk, but like I don't have to think about whether my book's gonna get like excluded from libraries based on how many F words it has. Like that's, and so at some point in like the YA editorial relationship, my editor, Catherine Teagan, who is awesome. I loved her. I love her so much. But she'd be like, how worth it to you is this F word? Because if you have more than one, you'll get kicked out of some libraries. And I'd be like, well, it's not that important, actually. So like that kind of thing is just a part of YA because of the way, it's like in classrooms, it's in libraries. So and we're obviously seeing like the horrible book banning that's going on as a result of these considerations. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. But in adult, they're like, whatever, which is like great, but it's not as like they're also whatever, like it'll go find its audience. So it's a little less targeted, which can be a problem. Anyway, I'll stop getting insider baseball in here. But
no, it's good though. This one's from Twitter. It's about the gene aspect of the book. Why were genes and gene editing? We talked a little bit about it in the Nature and Technology panel the other day, but why was that something that you wanted to play around with in conjunction with this Antigone framework?
So the entire reason that aspect is in here is that if you don't remember the lineage here, Antigone is the daughter of Oedipus, who famously married his mother and killed his father by accident. So she's the
inspired Freud to no end.
Yes, exactly. So she's the product of incest, and that creates a taboo in her society and in ours, but really in hers, like almost like a less scientific one, more mystical. So I just didn't have a particular interest in recreating the incest element. It's complicated and it wasn't what I wanted to focus on. So I decided to change it, but I wanted to create the same feeling of like, she feels like in the original play, she feels like she's been cursed from birth because of her lineage. And in this, she feels the same way. So I needed to create like a society that would make her feel that way and that would help us to understand her position in that society with something new, because we just relate to incest in a different way. For us, it's like, it's science, and also it's a factor of like abuse and stuff. So we just have a more technical understanding of it. I wanted to make it mystical again. And we don't understand gene editing. I probably have revealed that I don't understand gene editing as well as I'd hoped. But anyway, so that's kind of the reason. It was like a very practical concern for me as the writer. But then the more I dug into it, the more I thought it was interesting. Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because you do kind of infuse a little bit of that ancient Greek mythology and that era of mystery there, just with this, even calling genes Ichor was a really cool choice, because it's a very simple thing that kind of changes the vibe of what we think about when we are talking about genes and stuff like that. Gene is not a mysterious or kind of awe-inspiring word, but Ichor sounds much more fitting for that kind of thing, and it fits very well within the ancient Greek trappings of something like Antigone.
Well, thank you.
This one's another one from Twitter. It's asking about future projects. So now that you've got Poster Girl out, that was out in the fall, Arch-Conspirator is out on February 21st. What else are you working on?
Thanks to my obsession with Tor novellas and sci-fi novellas in general, like I really think it's a great format for sci-fi and fantasy. But Tor happens to be the one that's like doing the most. I sold them 3 novellas. So I have this one, obviously. You see it's novella size. I swear, why am I emphasizing this? I'm doing a terrible job. Somewhere my publicist is like... but anyway, I sold them 3. They're not related to each other. So the next one could be anything, but I'm here to tell you that it's more fantasy than anything I've written before. So
nice. I love it. Well, this one's for me. I'm really, because you just reading the novella, and I've really gotten into novellas, starting with Martha Wells' Murderbot Diaries. So it's kind of like this novella boom that's happening in physical format, because there are obviously a lot of novellas, but people were selling them in ebooks, or
Yeah.
like authors like Brandon Sanderson were kind of selling them on the side in that sort of hybrid way. But I love this novella boom, and to me it's really cool hearing that you have 3 coming, because obviously it's like you can write them in quick succession, but obviously people can read them in quick succession. But for you, what appeals to you as a writer in this novella format as opposed to something longer like a series or even just a novel?
Well, Goldilocks style is just right. It's like enough time it's enough time to really kind of dig into a new world and to feel like you're building one. You can do that in a short story, but you have to be very economical. I find short stories to be very difficult. So I like them. I think they're a good exercise, but some people, like, that's what they do. For me, they're tricky. So anyway, in a novella, there's a little more time to relax into your world building, but it's not so much like my books are very long in general. So like Poster Girl was my shortest at 90,000 words. So I feel like that's such writery talk. 90,000 words. It's shorter than my other books by a substantial amount. Yeah. Anyway, so it's nice for me to work in a smaller form. It takes less time. And I also feel like it challenges me to pare down the story to its like most essential elements, which is a good creative exercise. So it was like kind of perfect for me, but mostly like that's why I like reading them, because you get to be introduced to an author's work, and also to like what they're maybe experimenting with, and without like the full commitment of reading like a whole novel, which can feel intimidating sometimes, especially in this pandemic world that we now live in. It's like hard to focus. So I think that's my big pitch for novellas right now.
Yeah, I really love them, because I usually read them between larger books. So it's like if I'm reading something massive, like right now I'm reading Chuck Wendig's Wanderers, and it's like almost 800 pages. And after this, I'm like, I need a novella.
Oh, hot damn! That's 800 pages.
Oh, it's chunky.
Oh boy, I haven't tackled it yet.
It's really good, and it reads fast, but it is long. So I like novellas as kind of that like palate cleanser in between. But like you said, it's also a good way to introduce yourself to an author's work and be like, okay, this is kind of what I can expect in terms of their writing style or their world building and things like that. And then you can jump into longer series, or you can jump into a full novel or what have you. So I'm completely on the same page as you. All right. Well, we will wrap things up there. Once again, thank you for doing that reading from Arch-Conspirator. Really recommend people check out the book. It is short. It's a nice digestible chunk of Veronica's writing style. It's perfect. It's a Goldilocks novella. Come on, people. But that's out on February 21st. That'll be in hardcover. What other formats is it in?
I think it's audio and e. Yes. Those are all the formats, right? It's not in paperback. That's the only one it's not in. Yeah. Not yet, anyway.
But I do love hardcover novellas. It's really nice. Yeah. All right. Well, Veronica, thank you so much for doing that reading. Thank you everyone for tuning in, for the questions as well. If you want to hear more from Veronica, you can go check out our panel on the intersection of nature and technology, where things got wild, but in the best possible way.
They sure did. It was great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But enjoy the rest of TBRCon2023 day 5, and enjoy the rest of TBRCon week. And yeah, Veronica, thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.